June 23rd, 2016. I'm Councilman Mike Bonin, along with Councilman David Rue. And if I hear that again, you're going to be thrown out of the room. We'll be joined by Mr. Weezar shortly. In the meantime, we are going to begin. Mr. Rue, I have a number of items that I was going to recommend for our consent calendar. Oh, wait, before we do that, I have a number of people who filled out speaker cards on a number of items. Mr. Herman and Ms. Ramirez and Mr. Spindler, you can each have 4 minutes. For everything. Yep. Come on up.
Go ahead, Spindler.
Oh, you want? Okay.
Go ahead, please. I insist.
Okay. So this doesn't include public comment?
Yes, it does.
Oh, it does.
But don't I get 5 minutes for the whole meeting?
You have 4.
Oh. Okay, so, I'm sorry if I get enthusiastic for the policies of Councilman Woo, but, you can't help it. You got one man out of 15 people doing decent public policy work. That's a bad batting average, but it's a miracle in this city to get anybody that does anything for the public, and he does. So, again, there's nothing illegal about somebody saying, woo, because he does not spell it Ryu. I merely want to mention that Korean people spell R-Y-U and pronounce it Roo. And that's all. So now we got a lot of stuff on the agenda. None of it really matters. Absolutely categorically a waste of time for all of us because it says the same things. You want the homeless and the people living in the RVs to go the fuck away. You want them to disappear. You don't want them living on the street in their cars and these pre-1990 RVs. And for the record, we have a quorum now because now Councilman Jose Weezar is here. So this is why people that attend these meetings, are, number one, they're confused, and number two, they don't understand why you have to have these 10 items and you only get 4 minutes. I go to the city of Glendale, I get 2 minutes on every item if I go to the meeting. I go to the San Fernando Valley Council of Governments, and the mayor of Burbank, the mayor of San Fernando City, the mayor of Santa Clarita gives me 2 minutes on every single item I want to put a card on. In the second largest city in the United States, you don't want to hear from the public. So what do? You falsify arrests, you throw people out, you tell people they're not on the subject matter, and then you go on and you pass these things, and then later people want to know, why is the city of Los Angeles going to be sued in a class action lawsuit for violating civil rights for overnight parking districts being conspiracy used for the intent to deprive homeless people from having safe and programmatic access to the sidewalks and the streets. If you have a motor vehicle and it has a license plate and it has tags and you park it and you sleep in it, a mobile home is a person's home under California state law, and it is permitted to sleep in overnight. That's what you use a mobile home for. A mobile home is the same as a home under every single code, except the city of Los Angeles wants to come up with fictitious 20-foot maximum lengths, 8-foot maximum heights, but what we know is that it's really a ruse to get people deported out of the city for being homeless and living in a mobile home. You have a right to live in that mobile home on the street as long as you move it within 24 to 72 hours. And you guys are going to get sued, you're going to get an injunction, and then everybody that has a mobile home is going to be everywhere, and they're going to be dumping their sewage. Oh, bless you for that. And they're going to be dumping their sewage, and you guys are not going to be able to do a damn thing about it.
Perfect timing.
Mr. Maris?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Number 8, I hope that what I'd like to know is what federal earmark projects qualify for earmark repurposing opportunities in the LA-MTA exchange program, and who designs and or earmarks these projects, and who or what qualifies them. Number 10, item number 10. I am delighted that they that they actually are giving parking violations for street cleaning on street cleaning days. However, when you clean the streets, or when the Bureau of Street Services clean the streets, what they don't discuss is what contains inside the solutions that clean the streets. Is it just water and soap? Because here, as a homeless person, I have to carry all my paraphernalia, Lysols. And I am always cognizant of MRSA, staph infections, bed bugs, scabies, urine, feces, syringes. All that is scattered on the streets. I'm always afraid of sitting on the streets, anywhere. And I don't sit on the buses, ever. Not on any bus. I always stand on the buses. I'm always afraid of catching something. So they are highly contagious and highly lethal. So I would like to know what they use to clean the streets, because really, if you look at City Hall steps on Spring Street, forget it. It is filth. The entire place is filthy. It stinks. It reeks. It's awful. What are you cleaning, and with what? I'd like to know. Soap and water? That's not enough. Man, you need everything. And having said that, you got a lot of gangbangers urinating and feces dropping their load all over the streets, man. You got to get rid of this jungle crap. And on public comments, thank you very much. I am delighted. I have hope that God bless Donald Trump. We do want prayer for him. Should and when he becomes elected, God bless Donald Trump. He will completely refurbish America's transportation and streets. He will make sure that there are no gangs or wetbacks on the streets and on the transportations assaulting passengers, pedestrians, guests, and or tourists. So I am delighted. Donald Trump is under heat right now. He is being attacked, assaulted by gangs and wetbacks. Please pray for Donald Trump. I am deadly worried about him. I'm concerned about him and his family. I know what it is to feel gang stalked. I get it every day and night. I'm worried for him. I do pray for him. I chant for him. He's the only one I've got hope in. I absolutely believe that he will transform and clean up America, our streets, and refurbish all our streets and our transportations. And God knows our buses, they are filthy. Utterly filthy. I don't know who the hell cleans your buses, the LA Dot and the MTA, but they are filthy. You touch them, you get bugs on your hands. Please, you've got to do something about the bed bugs, the scabies. I know there's a lot of homeless, but a lot of them don't clean, don't bathe, don't do anything. They walk in, they get up, and they just go in and go about their day, but they don't wash themselves, they don't disinfect themselves, and they pass all that in restaurants, hotels, here, and everywhere. That's why I carry all my Lysols everywhere I go.
Ms. Ramirez, please stick to transportation-related items.
Okay, thank you. Well, that is part of the problem. See, there's too many illnesses coming out of transportation, sir. Highly airborne and highly contagious. I worry about that when I get on the buses. I don't sit on buses. Ever. I may be tired, but I don't sit. Period. I stand. 2 or 3 hours, I stand. So I try not to infect anybody, and I take my Lysols, and I make sure that I don't catch anything. I wear gloves, and that's what I do, so I don't pass it on to Spindler or Herman or anybody else. But I carry my Lysol, because no one cleans the buses or the streets in L.A.
Such compassion.
Thank you.
Such compassion. But you see the pony show here. We have a broken quorum with Nuri Martinez-Saud and Paul Correz. They don't believe in the public's interest on transportation. I took a train this morning. I came on a bus and I walked 2 fucking blocks. Isn't that amazing what an old man like me can do? But the worst case scenario is I fear for my life. That's why I have to walk an extra 2 blocks in case Major Englander is hiding with this fake police badge trying to stick it in my ass. He's not a real police after all. You do know that. He's a wannabe. He's a wannabe police officer. Didn't you read what the Daily News wrote about Mr. Englander? It mentioned that Mitch Englander, the
Mr.
dwarf,
Herman, you have to speak to matters.
part of general public comment. You
Yeah,
included it together, sir.
Yes, I did. General public
Dan-
comment in this committee has to be about matters that are transportation related or before this committee,
May I continue, sir?
if you stay on topic.
So as you see, the dwarf under works of gang
Mr. Herman.
reduction committee, I'm reading off
Mr. Herman, you are not on topic. This is the transportation committee. You
Listen.
can speak on matters dealing with transportation.
Item 10 continued from March 23rd by fucking Bonin, the fucking ass who continues to interrupt me under relative directing of the Bureau of Street Services, the stupid fuck schmuck, to report on parking violations, such as the ones we get when we park at meters because Jose Huizar has taken most of the parking out of Broadway and painted the curbs all red. We didn't vote for that, you jackass. Why would we want that? We're disabled. We have a right to park on a fucking public street because that's what you want me to engage with, Mr. Bonin. You like to shake me up. I get very shaken up real easily. And when my comfort bear is not here with me, I use intensifiers to identify the real issues like on item 8, an earmarked repurposing opportunity to participate in the Los Angeles County Metropolitan meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. So I can talk about all the fucked up transportation, all the fucked up disability violations you created for programmatic access, mobility access, pedestrian right-of-way access, path to travel access, and how much more do you want to hear, Mr. Mike Bonin, as Juana calls you, Bonin? So I'm on topic. So why do you have to get so offensive when I talk about like item 7? Resolution relative to the establishment of overnight parking. You know, Mr. B doesn't like to overnight park with me because we're afraid some asshole knocks on the door. Sir, you can't sleep here. It's a restricted area. But sir, I'm homeless. Me and Dr. B, or Mr. B, don't want to be bitch slapped by you, so that's why the window's closed. So what's your problem, officer? Well, I'm here to enforce a parking violation. But sir, it says violations only after a specific time. Mr. Bonin, like when you do in Venice Beach, where all the beach people like the beach, beach, beach. Tell him, Dr. B, tell him. So moving on, because the fucker wants me to stay on the items, let me talk about the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, LADOT report on resolution item 1, CD5, Peppa Pig, relative to the establishment of temporary parking. Fuck the temporary parking. We need parking for people who are homeless, people who live in their cars, people who live in their RVs, as Mr. Spindler pointed out. What's your problem, Bonin? Are you a racist? You don't like Hispanics sleeping in their fucking cars after they're kicked out on the street? Being homeless? That's a real life situation brought out in the LA Times. LAPD officers adopt new policy. Treat homeless people with compassion and empathy, Herman. See, they don't want you to have any empathy for homeless people, assholes.
Time is up. Thank you very much. Ms. Ramirez, if you'd like to come back with the Lysol, you're more than welcome to. All right, that brings us to the agenda. I'm going to recommend on the consent calendar, colleagues, items 1 through 7. Are there any objections? Seeing no objection, it will be the direction of the committee to approve items 1 through 7, which brings us to item number 8.
Mr. Chairman.
Item number 8 is the DOT report relative to identifying federal earmark projects that qualify for the federal earmark repurposing opportunity and participation in Metro's proposed fund exchange program.
And I understand that there are some technical amendments. Have those been circulated?
Mr. Chairman, before we start, I just wanted to, just for the record, really thank the Department of Transportation for item number 3. I know they have a huge backlog of PPDs, and this was 3 years in the making. So just wanted to really thank the department. I have some members of the community here as well who wanted to see this pass.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you. So I understand you have some technical amendments to be made?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm Bridget Smith, the Chief of Staff for LADOT. Unfortunately, Ms. Reynolds couldn't be with us today. Carlos Rios is here. He's our senior engineer working on this issue. He has a few amendments he'd like to present.
Good afternoon. If I may start with just a little bit of background as to where this report originated from and where we are at this point. Back in late 2015, through the Appropriations Act, there was an opportunity for agencies across the nation to repurpose old earmark funds. And the Federal Highways established two criteria by which certain projects would be eligible for this opportunity. One of which, if a project was less than 10% obligated, so these are projects, keep in mind, that were originally programmed for funding 10 years ago. So if you have a project that's less than 10% obligated, you have an opportunity to have these funds repurposed. Or if a project has been completed and realized the cost savings, then those cost savings could be repurposed for another use. So with that background, later in March 2016, they gave a little more guidance as to what exactly, how the agencies can benefit from this. And as our Regional Transportation Planning Authority, LA Metro, they subsequently adopted a board action in which they're proposing to, on behalf of the 86 jurisdictions that they represent, to essentially sweep up almost $100 million of projects that have this opportunity to be repurposed and swap these federal highway dollars with local dollars on 97 cents on the dollar for local dollars.
And so the difference in the report that was submitted and the technical amendments you're suggesting now are that rather than have, DOT would work with the affected council offices to develop a list of alternative projects. The department would report back in 90 days, and they would have a proposed list of replacement projects developed in consultation with the council office. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. I just want to give a little bit of background, but I wanted to, having said that, just a little bit of clarification on the recommendations, then add a technical correction to those recommendations, similar to what you just highlighted.
I think we're prepared to move forward.
Okay.
CD 15 and CD 3 have both turned out to support the changed language as well. Colleagues, any questions? All right. So without objection, we'll approve as amended. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to skip very briefly to item number 10 before I go to item number 9.
Item number 10 is the DOT report in response to a Bon and Buscaino motion relative to directing DOT, the Bureau of Street Services, and the CAO to report on parking violations on street cleaning days and related matters.
So to be quick, I found the report submitted by Bureau of Street Services to be lacking. It was only one page, and I don't think it's quite ready for prime time today. So what I'd like to do is, unless someone has any questions on it today, is continue this for 30 days and have the department report back. This needs to be a robust partnership between DOT and Bureau of Street Services. What we really want to do is, I think one of the biggest deliverables we can have on parking reform in the city of Los Angeles, and to show folks that we're serious about making the system kinder and gentler and the city's on their side, not on their back, is to deal with the problems we have with street sweeping and parking tickets. And we want to give folks the opportunity to know that a street sweeper has gone by and they're now okay to park there. So we don't issue a citation anymore, but also that they get a text alert that says it's okay to park here. And we have the technology now, and I know Street Services has done a great job implementing the GPS technology, but we're going to need more of an active hand from Street Services in getting us to that point where we can deliver that. So I'd like us to come back in 30 days with, and my staff can help guide through this to get some more active participation from Street Services. One of the things in particular we want to get from Street Services is releasing information on turns so that DOT will know when a street sweeper has passed and has moved on to the next street and stuff like that. And that's stuff that I think we can deliver on, and I'm eager to see that happen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, it's not a question, but when it came before us last time, I did ask about if you guys could include in the report areas like mental health courts or any other public facility that require parking, because I mean, especially right now in light of all the homeless issues that we're talking about. Department 95, LA County mental health courts, on Mondays, because of street cleaning, a lot of doctors, attorneys, family members, they have a hard time parking. It's even less parking because of these street cleaning services. So I know it's going to be difficult for you to map out everything with all sorts that might need assistance, but if you could kind of comment on that, and especially for the mental health court, when we're trying to help these individuals, especially get conservatorship, so we could help them, and if parking is the issue why we can't help them, that's kind of something that we could possibly help. So if you could comment on that too.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we have two speaker cards on this. Jay Beaver and Stephen Vincent, do you want to testify today or just wait till he comes back? I'll just make it brief. Sure. Thanks, Ron.
Good afternoon, committee members. Thank you again for your leadership on this issue, and I appreciate the chair's comments on this particularly, and also in comment on Councilmember Rue's concerns about the street sweeping at mental health areas, places where that's a problem. Also, there's schools, there's other things as well. And also, one of our recommendations is that once they get this GPS tracking, hopefully they will know to a better degree when that street sweeper goes by, and hopefully we can narrow that window. And that's something that I think will help a lot of people, especially areas which are really congested. There's no other place to park on street sweeping days. Thank you.
David, go ahead.
I just wanted to put on the agenda an idea that in cities in Texas, such as Austin and Dallas, and also some cities in Kansas, they don't have street sweeping in residential districts. Instead, the homeowners or the property owners are responsible for cleaning the curb adjacent to the property. And it seems to work. The streets are very clean, and if you don't take care of that cleaning, you are subject to being fined by the city for that. So that's another option to just look at, the possibility of doing it that way, and then reserving street sweeping for the business districts.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that item will be continued 30 days? Yes, 30 days. Thank you, Adam. Okay, that brings us to item number 9.
Item number 9 is a DOT report in response to a Bon and Rue motion relative to directing the DOT and the CAO to report in regard to the existing parking citation fine schedule and the feasibility of implementing a tiered parking citation fine structure.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Bridget Smith again. Just wanted to say that we want to thank you for bringing this item forward today. There's a lot of exciting changes happening in Los Angeles now, and many of these have come from the LA Parking Reform Working Group, including this one. And these are really complicated policy issues, as you can see from this lengthy report. I have some staff folks here today to walk us through it. We at LADOT really look forward to getting direction from the council on which of these various options you would like us to delve into a little deeper so that we can move forward on this issue.
What I think would probably be most helpful for the purposes of the discussion is if, rather than you laying everything out and then we jump around in the discussion, is if we take the conversation in pieces. So if you could, talk about the fine reduction proposals, and then we'll ask questions about that. Then if you could talk about the tiered, and then we'll ask some questions about that. And then the installment payment plan, we'll ask questions. That way I think the conversation will go a little more smoothly. And so maybe to set up the conversation so you'll know what to respond to, if I could ask a couple of you to stand aside for a second so I could have Jay and Stephen come back up, members of the Parking Reform Working Group who had comments. I think comments are mainly about the tiered structure, but are probably broader than that as well, so.
So I started this whole process of getting the city to look at the potential for reforming the parking system. And when we first met with the mayor, he mandated the working group and participants in the group to really open our minds and look at all the possibilities of ways that we can make parking much better and with substantial difference and change. And I think this report that we've got back from the Department of Transportation is a little bit of a disappointment because it really doesn't look to change. It looks to justifying the existing structure, the existing system. And any change is always going to involve difficulty, challenges. The question isn't whether there's going to be difficulty or challenges. The question is whether we have the political will to overcome those challenges, to make the changes that need to happen, that are right. Thank you.
Finish the thought.
That, it changes that, the question is really what's in front of us. What's the right thing for the city to do? That's really what the DOT needs to respond to. And how can we make these things happen? Sure, there's going to be challenges, but let's look at how we can overcome whatever challenges we have so that we can make the kinds of substantive changes that the city and the businesses and the residents of LA really, really need.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
So thank you again, Jay Bieber. So one of the things that was particularly disappointing when we saw the report was that they quoted Professor Donald Shoup in this report. He was the person in a negative light, and that he was somehow saying that he didn't believe in this fine structure, and he was actually the person who recommended that we take a look at this. And so attached to our extensive 14 pages that we sent you is an essay by him as well, so that bears looking at some point. As far as the logistical problems are concerned, we think these are all things that can be overcome. I made a call over to Claremont. I spoke to their chief of police who handles their parking. He says that they've been able to get around these challenges. He directed me to talk to their vendor, and they're called Data Ticket. And I have an email out to them. I spoke to them. They asked me to send them an email, and I did. And I'm just waiting for a response from them as to how they handle these sorts of things. So we're looking forward to working with DOT as a partnership and seeing they raise some concerns. We feel we have answered them along in the process, but if we need to go back and provide more information, we're happy to do so. We're happy to work in partnership to see how we can overcome these logistical problems. Because this is something that, when I get asked about parking reform, there's a whole bunch of things, and the chair and I have spoken about this individually. But the one thing that everybody wants to know about is what's going to happen with the fines. That's what the public is looking for. So if something substantial doesn't happen there, I think people are going to see the whole process as a failure, and we certainly don't want that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, DOT, come back up. So the subject, as Jay set it up pretty well, is fines, how high they are, how low they are, how they're structured, and how folks of different means can pay them. So why don't you start off with the reduced fines work that you've done and the recommendations you're making.
Okay, thank you. So let me introduce Ken Husting. He is the senior leadership person over the area of parking management for LADOT.
Good afternoon. So yet another pleasure to be here talking about parking reform. And before I get into talking about the different options, I just want to publicly acknowledge the work that the Parking Reform Group has done and how we have cooperatively worked together to see a number of changes through. And just some of those changes have been, for instance, accelerating LA Express Park, setting aside money for Code the Curb, for working on the street cleaning, dismissal of citations, make sure people don't get those citations when a street sweeper goes by, and also the local return, which we're hoping to come back in maybe about another month with some set percentages on how to move forward with sharing the money that the meters generate to a certain area. So anyways, what we have here is another parking reform initiative.
And just to set it up, as I understood it, the ask was for DOT to try to think about how we come up with a policy where the right rates dictate how much revenue the city gets,
Yes.
not how much revenue the city wants dictating what the rates are.
That's true.
And I think sort of a cornerstone to that was, there's a couple of ways to look at it. There's
Yeah.
sort of, what can folks afford? And the other way is, what would be a reasonable deterrent to bad behavior?
Yeah.
So with that, if you can.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump right into the options. And usually with any kind of options, we have the status quo, which I don't think is really acceptable, and mostly nobody really supports, since we want to make things better. Another alternative is actually reducing the parking fines for street cleaning and expired meters. Now, the reasons that we looked at these two citations were because these two citations account for nearly 50% of the citations that the department issues when it comes to parking. And so we're trying to find a reasonable justification to what it could be lowered down to, and, is there any kind of justification to bringing the citations down? And so we looked at the different citation amounts across the county, and we felt that by decreasing it by $10 each, it would put us more in line with LA County and also with a couple of the other cities such as Santa Monica and West Hollywood. And so with this option, we obviously had to look at the financial impact, which is not DOT's main consideration. It's going to be obviously City Council. But the total citation revenue loss for 1 year of reduced fines comes out to about $12.5 million. And also, when you reduce the fines for the parking meter reduction, you're also reducing potentially the number of turnover at the parking spaces, which can also have an impact on economic vitality and also the performance of demand-based pricing. And so those were just a couple of the citations we looked at. We selected those because those are the most far-reaching. And so if you want to just go ahead, and I'll take questions on this one.
Yeah, let me ask, you looked at what sort of a typical or middle range rate would be throughout the county.
Yes.
But that in and of itself is not an indication of what a good deterrent rate would be. It just makes us maybe seem more reasonable, which is a good thing in and of itself. But what research has been done or what evidence is available to give us a sense of what reasonable deterrent rate would be?
And actually,
Can I interject
Sure.
before we answer that? I just want to call to attention that I believe there's some statutes in our state laws and codes that also ask us to keep the range within the range of the county in general. So that was one of the deciding factors in the recommendation that we brought forward. So if you look at the report, you'll see that currently LA for expired meters is $63. Beverly Hills is 58, Santa Monica, West Hollywood 53, LA County 53, and Long Beach 49. So just to give you an idea of that range. So the proposal being 53 means that Long Beach would be the only city lower, and we would be at the same level as every other city except for, I think, Beverly Hills. So I just wanted to give you that context before we delved into the
And do we know
details.
how those cities determine their rate?
I think it's more of an art than a science. I think that there's, it's definitely a policy decision and a policy call made by each individual policy body.
Is it at all possible? Is there any body of research that indicates what thinking might lead to a deterrent-based rate?
so we've been actually trying to do research to find out what studies there are, specifically through a Transportation Research Board, which is part of the National Academies, to see if there's anything that dictates what, like the sweet spot is for a fine. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to find that. There is some discussion of motor vehicle moving violation fines, which is different and much higher amounts. But we haven't been able to find anything conclusive that would say, for instance, this is going to be what the effective price is to see some kind of change in behavior. And also, I have spoke with an individual who's an expert in pricing, and they did say normally to see any change in behavior, you would like to see a 20% adjustment to have some kind of noticeable effect. And I'm trying to get a hold of that research, even though it doesn't relate specifically to parking fines, to be able to see, what are the considerations, assumptions, and how they reach that conclusion.
In looking at Beverly Hills on one end with a much higher fine, Long Beach, I think you said, with a much lower fine, do we have any information from either of those cities at the polls of whether or not they have better or worse deterrence?
We can ask, I don't know if we've,
We don't have that information, but we can ask.
yeah,
I think that would be,
can
what are
explore
the
that.
recidivism rates
absolutely.
in either of those cities, and maybe sort of a few midpoints to see if there's any assumptions that can be drawn.
We'll do that.
And what sort of socioeconomic analysis did DOT do on the rates?
So what happened is we took a look at the number of citations issued across the city for street cleaning, for meter violation, and all violations in general. And we coded them down to the different zip codes. So we created a heat map, which I will share with the committee. Can you have that? So we generated a heat map of where the different citations were issued and trying to look for trends of where is there a specific area that is being hit hard by citations. And through the analysis, what we found is generally where there's higher density, more higher economic activity, is where the tickets are issued. So it doesn't necessarily correspond directly with a socioeconomic, for instance, a more impoverished area. It's generally where there's more economic vitality. And you'll see some...
You're issuing a lot of tickets in my district.
Yeah. And you have I'd say, a more affluent district.
Yeah.
And so it shows wherever, again, there's more car ownership, where there's more economic vitality, where there's business activity. And that seems to be more the trend than specifically income.
Is there a relationship here to residential parking district violations or anything like that?
We didn't see that.
And if I can just add, I think this is consistent with what we know from our expertise in the profession, that really the purpose of the meters and the purpose of the parking controls and enforcement that we have is to ensure turnover for business and commercial reasons. So the correlation that we're seeing there is very intuitive and falls in line with sort of the principles behind managing parking in this way.
So you said you recommend lowering the fines in the two areas, the expired meters and the street sweeping.
Actually, we're just presenting the option. We're not
Right.
Yeah.
Presenting that as an option. In both of those areas, do we have any sense at all of how often violations are intentional versus folks just didn't understand our confusing signage?
No, and I don't, short of doing surveys, which would be fairly complicated and not sure how the response rate would be, we don't have that information.
And what public safety violations were not considered for reduction of fine?
I'm sorry, what was that?
There were some public safety considerations that were
Yeah, so
led to not considering reduction?
Yeah, so what happens when we're looking at the public safety violations, they account for a very small percentage of the violations that are issued, and they account for actually less than 1% of the violations that are issued. And so we felt that looking at the street cleaning and the expired meters was something that would be more of an impact citywide and be able to appeal to a broader audience than just the public safety.
Okay. Mr. Rue, any questions on the rates?
Yes. I mean, I'm in line with what the chairman's talking about, and obviously I'm looking forward to your report on the tiered fine structure. But just one question on the on your reduction. I mean, the option of across-the-board reduction. You know, from 2006 to 2012, in about a span of 6 years, it was about a 58% increase in fines for the expired meter. So, you know, what was our city's reasoning for that?
It was to encourage compliance, as I was told.
Okay. And on this map, I'm a little confused because on your you said the parking citations are in correlation with economic activity?
It does fall in line a lot of times with either car ownership, where there's less parking availability, business activity. So say, for instance, in areas of Hollywood, West LA, downtown, you'll tend to see more of those violations.
Okay, because your report said, I thought it said, parking violations across the city is correlated to population density.
Yeah, if I may, Jay Kim from DOT, I think the population density, there's probably a slight distinction. If you look at downtown and Hollywood,
Yeah, that
it's
makes
really
sense.
the high density of population, right? The other areas might be kind of medium density, but I think we're talking about those areas with the kind of the extreme high density of population that in tandem with economic activity plus car ownership, right? If you sort of take all those three, then it sort of triangulates into those areas that you see on the map.
Well, besides like the Venice area, for Chairman Bonin and my district, like in Los Feliz, Hollywood Hills, there's not that much economic activity. So what accounts for the high ticketing?
Oh, are you talking about like, but we have areas that are in downtown Hollywood, for example.
Right, no, downtown Hollywood, yeah.
But which neighborhoods?
Which neighborhood are you referring to?
Like especially the Hollywood Hills or Los Feliz and Griffith Park area.
And again, there could be some correlation also where you have the lots of economic activity and the demand on the parking resources, and then the kind of the spillover parking effect in neighborhoods, right? We also have those kinds of areas that surround the immediate economic activity area that are kind of being protected. We also have tickets probably in those areas that also account for the high issuance rates that you see on those maps. So it's not just along the corridor, but it could spread into the neighborhoods where you have those specific parking restrictions that, that's designed to protect the neighborhoods.
And
as
something
well.
else I want to point out is that when you look at the overall number of citations, it does show a high intensity in that area. But when you look at the expired meters, it tends to drop off. And when you go to the street cleaning, it increases. So what that tells us is a lot of those citations that are being issued in those areas are street cleaning. And we know that, Hollywood Hills does have a high demand of parking. And so a lot of those are probably correlating to the street cleaning.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I think it's not just economic activity, it's just a lack of parking.
Yeah, to some
Yes,
degree.
Right, yeah.
it's-
So
it's
it's
the-
not, because some of these areas don't have necessarily businesses. I know downtown LA and Hollywood does. I mean, that coincides with your definition, but even like the Mid-Wilshire, it's fairly low, and that's high economic activity.
No,
So I
You
think
you have
it's,
a valid point.
Yeah, that's it.
yeah.
That's a valid
So
point.
I don't think it's, because I thought it was density, and I had a whole bunch of other questions about density equating to income, but your map shows it's not density, so.
And I think when you go to the street cleaning, it reinforces specifically what the point you're making. It does show some of those other areas having higher intensity. And again, it's because of the lack of parking. So your point's well taken.
Okay.
And I think to summarize, that, it was an interesting analysis, and we could spend more time on it. I think it's very complex
Yeah.
to pinpoint, and we're doing very broad strokes in how we're describing it. But with one of the key factors we were looking for was the idea that the lower socioeconomic areas of the city were being perhaps harder hit. And as we've been discussing, in the neighborhoods that we've been discussing here aren't really considered in those categories. The map is not showing us that. And so that was probably our main conclusion that we were drawing from the analysis.
Yeah, we'll follow up with you offline. I mean, this is a great map. So we'll follow up.
Okay, tiered fine structure.
Tiered fine structure. So the first thing I want to say with the tiered fine structure is that actually LADOT, on a philosophical level, supports this concept. I think it's fair to be able to have recidivism, the people that continually ignore the violations to pay more. So philosophically, we support the idea.
What, 13% of our?
Yeah, it's about 13%. So the only problem is that there are some logistical issues that we would need to overcome, and we don't have solutions to those just yet, which would require further analysis. But just for the sake of people listening, the tiered fine structure is a progressive fine structure so that the first citation is one set amount, the second citation increases. It could either be doubled or it could be some other variation. The third citation has yet a higher amount, and we can go from there. And so if you get all of those within the same category, within the same year, you're looking at the higher amounts. So as I did mention, it did pose a few logistical challenges. And first of all, depending on if council is interested in being revenue neutral or not, it could determine how much the subsequent fines could be. So those could either be, depending on the violation, say for instance, if you pick street cleaning, which is a high issuance, you may make the following citations in the hundreds or even thousands of dollars to be able to try to again, make it revenue neutral. If you're not interested in making it revenue neutral, then obviously we can look at a different structure. Also, there's a significant programming effort in identifying motorists that have multiple vehicles who receive multiple citations. And so we identified complications through our contractor. If somebody has a number of vehicles and they could have minor variations with their vehicles as far as middle initial, no middle initial, and unfortunately that does create problems within DMV and also being able to try to reconcile, does that person actually own this vehicle, do they not? It just adds additional delay and complication to the programming.
And if I can just underscore that point, I think that there will be a misperception for most of the public. It'll be a hard distinction to make that the ticket really goes to the registered owner. So, a particular driver of a rental car, of a commercial vehicle, or even within a family, if the cars are all registered to one person, or as Ken mentioned, the name's given differently at different times, which people do because they have sort of the reason to do that for whatever reason. It'll be difficult to evenly apply this in every situation. There will be those little technical issues that are kind of quirky, and we'll have to give some thought and figure out a little bit better how we would address commercial vehicles and rental cars, since those cars are not going to be registered to individuals at all.
That's all true. Those are logistical challenges, and I get it, and there's nothing I disagree with. But I don't know, it strikes me as a little bit sort of like some of the issues that came up with the plastic bag ban a few years ago. One member of the council said, some people might not wash them enough and keep them sanitary. Someone else said, how are people going to pick up dog poop? Someone else said, people will forget to bring them. There's a lot of reasons why it's not a perfect policy.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's not a good policy. Doesn't mean it's not a huge improvement over the current system. So I think those are all things to
There's one other.
None of them seem like roadblocks.
And I just want to assure you that we at the LADOT are very committed to moving forward on whatever makes the right path forward for the city, and we will do our best to work through. We've worked through a lot of funny, weird glitches in transportation before, and I'm certain that we'll find ways around it. But just highlighting those for you now.
And I just want to highlight one other logistical challenge, which again, it's just something that we have to figure out, and we're reaching out to other cities. Specifically Claremont, on how they're able to overcome the challenge. But specifically is when a citation is issued, what is the fine amount printed on that citation? So if you have somebody that's received multiple citations and they are appealing those citations, or it's an adjudication, or they're taking it to court, do we charge them the higher amount? Are they at the lower amount until that's resolved? We don't know, and we need to be able to make sure that when the driver gets that citation, that they actually know what they need to pay. So that's probably one of the more common issues that we're going to find, more complicated issues, but it's something that we need to do further investigation and see how other cities, if any, have overcome this challenge.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's argued that right now our parking fine structure is more punitive. I mean, that's why we're having this whole discussion here today. And as you said earlier in your presentation, the goal, and as the chairman stated, the goal is to be more fair, right? That's why I think a lot of us are leaning towards, and the parking reform task force came up with the tiered fine structure. And we want to be fair, and we also want to use the fines as a deterrent. And in your own report, it says 85% of the folks are first-time offenders, right? Yeah, roughly 85% are first-time offenders. So it is showing that, it's not the fine. Most people are following the law. It's just that they just forgot, or whatever reason. So, so I want us to continue with that and come from that space, because earlier when you said your biggest concern about the tier fine structure, not the biggest concern, but what you guys were trying to figure out was being revenue neutral. That goes back to saying that all we care about is the financing. Let's come up with a fair system, and for those 16%, and then from the 85 who are for those who get fines, 86% pay, and it seems like 14% aren't. I'd like to find out why they're not paying, but let's first come from a place of what's fair, what's true deterrent, and then worry about exactly what revenue that's going to bring in, because then that will show confidence in the public that we are actually trying to make a system that works, not a system to help balance the budget. So,
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that.
and actually, one of the things I'm very happy that this brought up is I would love, and it's a problem in the Hollywood Hills, I would love to help you solve, and I'm glad it's forefront, those little special case examples, like rental cars. That is a huge, huge problem in areas like my district where people from all around the world are renting cars and they don't care. We're trying to help with the better signage and more education, but if they get a ticket, they leave the country and they don't have to pay. So, and I know there's like this whole gray area, so I would love to work with you on a policy with the tier structures. I mean, I would even argue for the repeat violators. Obviously, for one reason or another, they don't care. I would increase the fines even more and go after the rental cars so they start changing their policy. So they could start educating the people who rent their cars that, about parking rules and traffic rules in our city of LA. So, and there's other areas like, I know we're trying to be equitable and we don't, certain areas are really upset with our parking enforcement because of the prompt ticketing that we do. But then we have other areas, like in areas in my district, which would more than welcome parking enforcement. So in those areas, why not ticket more, right? So, and in those areas, we asked our parking enforcement to ticket more, but they were being generous and they were saying, no, we just want to educate them, and they haven't ticketed them. So there are areas where they want tickets, and there's areas where they're saying it's too severe, so we have to figure out a way to balance that out as well.
Thank you.
All right,
So the other options, go into those?
yeah.
Okay. So we did have some other options for consideration. Some are in place and some were in development. And with the support of City Council, we'll continue to further develop those. One of them is the installment payment plan. So this is something that we do have in place when it comes to somebody who has trouble paying for a parking citation. They do have the ability to request to put 40% down and then 2 additional payments of 30% each. So recently, we were only able to offer that once it went to adjudication, before a hearing examiner. The California Vehicle Code did make a change last year, and so we're now in the process of trying to implement the change, which allows us at any stage of the process to be able to offer that installment payment plan. So instead of having to go all the way to adjudication, they could go ahead and make the request.
40, 30, 30.
40, 30, 30. We can change that option.
So you could come up with additional options.
We can. But currently we have 40, 30, 30. The next option is a homeless citation community service pilot program. So over the past couple months, LADOT has been working with the City Attorney's Office to develop a community service program for homeless individuals that are not able to pay off their parking citations. And so in our recommendation, we're actually requesting to come back to committee to establish guidelines to help further develop this program, come up with criteria, and be able to describe what it could be and do a pilot. The following one option is a community service program for low-income motorists. So this is very similar to the homeless program, except it expands it to just those beyond homeless, to those that actually qualify under low-income standards. And finally, the last one is, which we just previously discussed, was the street sweeping violations. So apparently we're going to be having a report back, and again, that's been an ongoing effort as part of a recommendation from the LA Parking Reform Group. And so with that, I'll welcome any more questions you have.
Great. So what I'd like to suggest is a couple different things. One, I think that the question of the reduced fines and the tiered structure should move together in tandem. Whatever we do, we should do that together and separately. And I think we need to do a little more work on the tiered structure. And I know the mayor's office has asked DOT to sit down again with the parking reform working group to discuss that more thoroughly. Would love to be a part of that, obviously. And I think that's a necessary first step. I'd also like, when this comes back, subsequent to those conversations with the parking reform working group, for DOT to have conducted some further analysis on tiered parking in two separate categories. One, street sweeping violations in particular, a proposal looking at reducing the initial fine and adding escalating fines for repeat offenders. And two, find a public safety related citation category with a high rate of repeat offenders, and in that proposal maintain the base citation rate but add escalating rates. And then that'll give us some jumping off points. On the other stuff that you mentioned, the installment payment plan and the homeless citation, low-income community service, I think those are all great ideas. I'd like the department to flesh out a few more details on. The installment payment plan, I think it makes sense to maybe have something other than 40-30-30 as well. So folks who are really destitute, who may not be able to take time off to do community service, could still be able to pay it. And on the homeless one, I just want to think about how you do that. You'd want to be doing that in conjunction maybe with LASA or service providers. And I know there's been some thought to doing it sort of on a rotating quarterly basis. I don't think you could do it on a rotating quarterly basis because folks wouldn't have the opportunity 3 quarters out of the year, presumably, to avail themselves of it. It's got to be something that has to be sort of broader and more universal. Anything you'd like to add?
Yes. Well, you know, on the homeless point, instead of just having an arbitrary community service component, I think you have a great point there. Where if we partner with LASA, we could say because there's a lot of permanent supportive housing programs where they provide wraparound services, counseling, life skills training. So it's not just offering it up for just anyone, but someone who's showing that they're really trying to make a difference, right? So if they're part of a program, maybe we could waive all these costs because they are getting engaged. But again, this is something more. I think the LASA idea is great. I think if you spoke with them,
city attorney, which has,
right?
Oh, yeah.
You've spoken to them, they have a great
Legality.
We're working
Well,
closely
yeah,
with
right.
the city attorney, yes.
So
They're here today if you need additional information.
right. So I think that's in that because obviously, if they're homeless and they happen to be mentally ill, I don't think no amount of programs is gonna community service programs they're gonna take advantage of, right? So something more to connect it with services where like the city attorney program. And I just had a question about 86% you have payment of people who are paying their parking citations. The 14% who aren't paying, why are they not paying? Do we know? Do we have any data on that?
Unfortunately, we don't.
Can we possibly break that down? I mean, is it all socioeconomic or is it all rental cars? I mean,
Let us look into that further and bring more
Right.
information back, see what
Yeah.
more detail we can find.
right. And on that note, Mr. Chair, if we could just add that one, it's a little, especially in my district, pet peeve, seeing how you guys could improve the collection rate, especially for like special cases like rental cars or, non-ownership or something like that. I would love to see if they could find that out.
All right, so we will hold that in committee with those instructions and those requests back. Thanks for working on it, and we'll look forward to the meeting with DOT and the Parking Reform Working Group.
Great, thank you
Thank
so much.
And with that, we are adjourned, yes?